Hello, and welcome again to Contemporary American Society. This is our second class, and today we're going to discuss the causes of persecution. As we discussed last week, persecution is the systematic mistreatment of a person or a group of people. It's treating a person or a group badly because of their beliefs, their customs, especially their race, their political affiliations, or their religious beliefs, systematically using a plan or a method. And today we're going to look at an example of that when the Christians have been persecuted because some people feel that Christianity challenges their own culture. That is, some people feel that threatened by Christianity because they feel that it hurts their own religion, their own beliefs. The Puritans, who were English Protestants who wanted to purify the Church of England, to eliminate Catholicism, were persecuted by the leaders of England and the leaders of the church. The religious persecution that caused the Puritans to come to America was the belief held by both Protestants and Catholics that there should only be one religion in a society, and a group of people who live in the same place, who interact with each other, and who have the same culture, the same beliefs, and the same values, and the same way that they live. The Pilgrims were the first group of Puritans to seek religious freedom. In the 17th century, they came to America from England in order to have freedom of religion. They settled in the colonies, the areas that they would later control, and that would later become the United States. And when they arrived, they settled in America, and they were called settlers. After they formed the colonies, they were called colonists. But when the Pilgrims arrived in America, they found Native Americans, who were then called Indians, and who believed in a different kind of God. The Pilgrims then persecuted the Indians because the Indians' religious beliefs were different, and because the Indians lived on land the Pilgrims wanted for themselves to practice their religion. So they terrorized and killed the Indians, just like the Pilgrims themselves had been persecuted in England. The persecuted Pilgrims then became the persecutors of the Indians. And let's look at a short video about the Pilgrims and the Indians. And when they talk about tribes and natives, they're referring to the Indians.
The year 1607, on April 26th, a fleet of 3 ships from Lincoln and a place which under orders to select a more secure location, they went out to explore what is now known as Hampton Roads. Finally found a large peninsula near the Chesapeake. This place was really well suited. One of the best things about the place was that the natives, both inside was poor. A council was formed which included Captain Christopher John Smith, who was a no, not that John Smith. It's a picture of the real John Smith. John mercenary. On May 14th, the settlement was founded and consisted of a wooden fort built in a triangle. Some of the settlers reflect treasure reports the while Newport was in England, the remaining settlers suffered hunger and illness. As that wasn't enough, they were constantly threatened by the attacks of the broken and fraudulent tribes, which were organized like a kind of empire led by Chief Wahun Senakau. John Smith went looking for food along the Chica, but was captured by the natives. Smith lived his life, but was eventually without harm, which he later attributed to the chief's order. The name of the girl was Pocahontas. Stop. This is not Disney. Real Pocahontas. When Newport came back to Jamestown in January 1608, he had brought around 100 new settlers. But the trouble was over for the new settlers. Through carelessness, the village was set on fire. The James River had closed over and forced the settlers to live in the woods. 3 months later, Newport went back to England. During this time, John Smith also made an agreement with Wahun and the settlers established a much needed trade with the tribe. John Smith spent the summer of 1608 exploring Chesapeake Bay and produced a map that would be of great value for the first century. While Smith was gone, he left his friend Matthew Scrivener as governor in his place. Scrivener was not suited for leading, and when Smith returned, John Smith was elected president of the council. When Newport arrived back at Jamestown, he had brought madmen from Germany, Poland, and Slovakia, but none of them had the ability and helping to make the colony self-sufficient. This made John Smith write a very angry letter to the colonists. John Smith was eventually forced to go back to England because of a bad injury after an attack. It seems that the letter from John Smith had an effect. On June 2nd, 1609, a 7-ship fleet towing 2 pinnacles left Plymouth destined for Jamestown. They went into a strong storm, and the ships were separated. Some of the ships made it to Jamestown, but the leaders and most of the supplies had been aboard the sea engine before the storm for 3 days, and was eventually on purpose driven onto the beams of the ship. This allowed all aboard to be made at sea. The survivors stayed in the unit for 9 months, and during that time they built 2 ships so they could carry the settlers and recruit them. While all this happened, the situation at Jamestown had gone from bad to worse. During this downtime in 1609 to 1610, only 60 of the original 240 settlers survived, and there is scientific evidence that they turned to cannibalism in order to On May 23rd, 1610, the ships from Bermuda arrived at Jamestown. Most of the surviving settlers were kidnapped, and so everybody was loaded on the 2 ships and set sail for England. On June 10th, another fleet met the departing ships. Aboard this fleet was Governor Baron de la Wall, and both supplies and additional settlers. All the settlers returned to the front. With the arrival of de la Wall, tensions rose between the settlers and the natives. This war between the how handsome and the settlers lasted until Samuel Argyle captured Pocahontas, after which she accepted a fee. Among the survivors of the first fight was John Bull. In 1614, Wolfe could successfully harvest tobacco and became a very wealthy man. Prosperous and wealthy, he married Pocahontas, and this marriage brought several years of peace between the settlers and the natives. However, at a trip to England, Pocahontas became sick and died on March 21, 1617, and about a year later her father died. Now it was Mahunsinaka's brother who was in charge, and when he saw how the settlers spread out, the relations got worse and worse. After years of tension, the settlers, chief of Chanaka, decided to eliminate once and for all. On the morning of March 22, 1622, our handsome attacked outlying plantations on the During the attack, more than 300 settlers were killed. The 6,000 people who came to the settlement between 1608 to 1624, over 3,400 survived. The natives tried another attack in 1644. In 1646, Chanaka was captured and killed with a shot in the back against soldiers. Chanakana's successor signed the first peace treaty between the Powhats and Indians. That concludes our little trip through time. If you have any questions, take them out of the questions. I thank you for the listening.
Okay. Now let's see what causes two other kinds of persecution in the United States: gender persecution and racism. Okay, gender persecution is usually by men toward women, and racism can be against any people of color. For example, African Americans, that is Black people, Hispanics, those who come from Spanish-speaking countries, the Asians, Native Americans, and Muslims, just to name a few. Although there have been some advances, women and people of color still suffer from gender persecution in the workplace. And people of color still suffer from racism. Let's look at some factors that can cause gender persecution and racism. First, we're going to talk about some cultural factors. Both society and the government are controlled by white men in the United States, and many men show prejudice toward women and toward persons of color. That is, their opinion about women and persons of color is simply because they're women and because they're persons of color, that is, because the color of their skin is different. Men often show discrimination toward women and persons of color, which gives them a disadvantage, and that makes it less difficult for the men and more difficult for the women to become successful in the workplace. We also see stereotyping of women and persons of color. That is, many white men view themselves as strong and view women and persons of color as weaker and less able to defend themselves, which makes them easier to be victims of persecution. A primary cause of gender persecution and racism in the workplace is that there are many fewer women and persons of color in a lot of industries like finance, architecture, the automobile industry, software development, to name a few. And that can cause a hostile working environment in which women and people of color are harassed. There are also few women or people of color in positions of power and in politics in the United States. And because there are so few, women and people of color have fewer opportunities to change policies and to fight gender persecution and racism. The fact that there are few people of color or women in some industries and in politics means that they have fewer opportunities to make changes to policies or to make changes to fight gender persecution and racism. Let's look at a short video about 4 generations of African Americans, and they're going to talk about what it's like to be Black in the United States.
Tell them how this country fucked you, like my parents did, or become a lot. You just have to grow up in this bubble and
said this is more than politics, and this is more than just, oh, well, this should happen in America, but this is the life of a black person or a person of color. Protest when I show up in the room. If I say, I'm gonna wear my hair is great, so I know that I've seen it as a style that someone might be talking about as a black woman. I'm gonna talk about my son almost 18 and I'm saying I'm
We held a march in Times Square, even though they tried to keep us out. We had about 25,000 people in Times Square who were celebrating love and home. All the people were coming together promoting a society without oppression. That was special, very special.
I remember the memory of the young one. When you're in that moment, I kind of take it out, kind of go into another state in your mind where it's like, okay, I'm experiencing that, and, have the threat of being arrested or whatever, but I'm alive, I'm breathing. George Floyd couldn't breathe, but I'm breathing, so I'm here, shouting for him, I'm here shouting for Jonathan and everybody else.
All the time, they went hopeless and helpless. All those things are that they get. I think that's one of the differences what's happening now. What's speaking up?
Yeah, New York perfectly, but sharing of power and sharing of voice that is some of this momentum.
Society really do not need police. However, if you want to change the police force, you think to understand that either that they're going to be scared to harm somebody because of repercussions from the community, or politicians will start having officers prosecuted. They'll go in jail cops, harm people. People are tired now. People are tired of dying, and they don't see any help on the horizon. So they have to the change that they want to see in the world.
Lately now, just saying everything is, giving me a lot of anxiety, but I just feel like change is coming, and it's good to know that I have so many people on the side, people with so many generations. So I just think that just speaks so much volume. So it's scary, but you have to have some type of peace of mind that it'll be okay. Okay, let's talk about ethnic persecution. Let's talk about ethnic persecution. And when we speak about ethnicity, we're referring to differences between people, mostly because of their national or cultural traditions, their language, their religion, their customs, and ethnic conflict, that is ethnic disagreement, can lead to violence and suffering, and to persecution, and specifically ethnic persecution, which can be caused by political discrimination, by social discrimination, by cultural discrimination, and by economic discrimination. Some examples of economic discrimination would be if there's little availability of jobs, if minorities are paid less than white males, the goods and services that the prices of goods and services, the amount of money that's available to help businesses owned by minorities. Those are all factors that cause ethnic conflict or ethnic persecution. And when we speak about minorities, we're referring to groups of people who are different from the majority of people, the majority being white males. Minorities are often discriminated against because of their race or their religion. Last week, we spoke briefly about the internment camps for the Japanese in the United States following the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941. And I'd like to look at a video clip now about the ethnic persecution of the Japanese in the United States.
On December 7th, 1941, 16-year-old Akihiro shared the horror of what she did not know was how that shared experience 20,000 Japanese Americans alienated from their as of 1941, Japanese Americans had been growing in the U.S. for over 50 years. About one-third of them were immigrants. Many of them settled on the West Coast and had lived there for decades. The rest were born as American citizens, like Aki. Born Akiko Kato in Seattle, Aki grew up in a diverse neighborhood where she never thought of herself as anything but American until the day after the attack, when a teacher told her you people bombed Pearl Harbor. Racism, sabotage, people labeled Japanese Americans as potential traitors. FBI agents serving homes, confiscate belongings, and without trial. Pakistan was not immediately subjected to these extreme measures, but on February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, the order authorized the removal of any suspected enemies, commercial Japanese heritage, from designated military areas. At first, Japanese Americans were pushed to leave restricted areas and migrate inland, but as the government froze their bank accounts and imposed local restrictions on securities, many were able to leave Pakistan. In March, a proclamation forbid Japanese Americans from changing their residence from traveling in military zones. In May, the Army moved Aki and her family, along with over 7,000 Japanese Americans living in Seattle, Army in Washington. This was one of several makeshift and former Fairmount and racetracks where the entire families were packed into one concluded stable and barracks. Over the ensuing months, the Army moved Japanese Americans into long-term camps in desolate areas of the West and South, leaving Aki and her family to Manila, southern Idaho. Guarded by armed soldiers, many camps were still being constructed when incarcerated men. Built prisons were overcrowded and unsanitary. People fell ill and were unable to receive proper medical care. The War Relocation Authority relied on incarcerated to keep camps running. Many worked in camp facilities or taught in Colombian classes, while others raised crops and animals. Some Japanese Americans were found organizing labor strikes, but many more, like Aki's parents, sought to recreate some semblance of life outside the camps, but the reality of their situation like many younger incarcerated, Aki was determined to leave. She finished her final year of high school at Minnetonka, and with the aid of an anti-racist employer organization, she was able to enroll at Friends University in Kansas. For Aki's family, however, things wouldn't begin to change until late 1940. A landmark Supreme Court case ruled that continued detention of American citizens without charges was unconstitutional. In the fall of 1945, the war ended and camps closed down. Remaining incarcerated were given a mere $25 and a train ticket to their Florida tracks, but many no longer had a home or job to return to. Aki's family had been able to leave their apartment, and Aki eventually returned to Seattle after college. However, post-war prejudice made finding work difficult. Incarcerated faced discrimination from workers and tenants. Unfortunately, Japanese Americans were alone in a fight against racial discrimination. Aki held work one of Seattle's first interracial labor unions and joined the Congress of Racial Equality. She was true, and over the next several decades, her advocacy for multicultural, socially conscious education impacted thousands of students. However, many cats incarcerated, particularly members of older generations, were unable to rebuild their lives after the war. Children of incarcerated began a movement calling for the United States to atone for this historic injustice. In 1980, the U.S. government officially apologized for the wartime incarceration and the catastrophic results of racism, hysteria, and stable political leadership. 3 years after this apology, Aki Kudose was awarded the Human Rights from the Seattle chapter of the United Nations, celebrating her vision of peace and respect for people of all backgrounds. For a heart-wrenching look at how internment affected one family, check out this video on Giving Patrons. United by Blood, United by Blood.
Okay, finally, I'd like to discuss political persecution. And political persecution is the persecution of an individual or group within society for political reasons, particularly in order to prevent their ability to take part in the political life of their society. Between 1956 and 1971 in the United States, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is the United States National Security Organization that's responsible for law enforcement and security and intelligence, began a series of secret and illegal projects to watch American political organizations and to get information from them, to hurt their reputation and to stop them. This program was called COINTELPRO. It targeted groups and individuals that the FBI believed were subversive, that were disrupting the US political system. And this included women's groups, it included communist groups, the group of people who were against the war in Vietnam. It included the Black Power movement, including Martin Luther King Jr., who fought for civil rights, for ending racism and segregation and discrimination in the United States. Groups that fought for the rights of animals and the environment were also targeted, as were the American Indian movement, independence movements like the Puerto Rican independence groups, and against different political groups. In 1971, the FBI gave money and weapons to an extreme group that was organized like a military force and changed it to the Secret Army Organization, with targeted groups and their leaders that were in the anti-war movement, and they used violence. Let's watch a short video about COINTELPRO, the secret FBI program. Let's see exactly how it worked.
FBI's a government agency supposedly intended to protect Americans from the worst criminals imaginable, from domestic terrorists to serial killers. But who do you run to when the FBI wants you dead? Like the high concept premise of the latest Jason Bourne movie, but this was actually the terrifying reality faced by a number of political leaders and public figures. As a result of COINTELPRO, the FBI's clandestine series of projects. Well, what was COINTELPRO really? What did it happen? Who were its targets? And what terrifying illegal methods were employed under its purview? There's only one way to find out. But be warned, by the time this video is over, the FBI won't seem like the brave crime stoppers the movie doctor made them as. COINTELPRO, which stands for Counterintelligence Program, they were responsible for everything from psychological warfare to cold-blooded murder, all committed against mostly non-violent individuals. The greatest crime was questioning the system. Just how far the system will go to silence these questions will alarm and terrify you. And worth it all was FBI Director nightmarish response of government overreach and illegal domestic espionage. The red scale full swing. You don't need to be an expert in American politics to know that late 1950s America was terrified of communism. The threat of the bomb loomed large over American psyches, and Soviet spies and sleeper agents seemed to lurk in every shadow. Russia and the West were fighting a culture war, and the West was scared of collusion. When someone is afraid and backed into a corner, there's almost nothing they won't do to protect themselves, whether the initial fear is justified or not. The U.S. needed bold strategy to fight the perceived communist threat growing within their own borders, and GMT was on the case. He gave his underlings a sweeping directive to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize any political group seeking to subvert it for the FBI's light. Hoover had the tacit permission of President Eisenhower and soon after President Kennedy. General Robert F. Kennedy personally signed off on a number of covert projects under the COINTELPRO banner. Of course, while every sinister government project requires some enabling bureaucrats to sign all the permission slips, there always needs to be some triggermen willing to get their hands dirty and get the dastardly job done. Always heard the saying, success. So when I have the opportunity to jump into a law program here at USC, it was just one of those no-brainers for me. In this meeting, we have William C. Sullivan, Director of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Operations. Sullivan's first target was the Communist Party of America, who, on name alone, were obviously no friends of the Cold War FBI. Some of the techniques used by the FBI to destroy the Communist Party from the inside included having agents sending directly anonymous phone calls, having the IRS constantly audit them, and sending in forged documents to sow dissent among the party's ranks. You'll come to notice that this is a running theme among the COINTELPRO projects, using psychological warfare tactics to put groups against each other and their members. To this end, literally nothing was off the table. FBI agents infiltrated symposium members to cause conflict, intelligence gathering for blackmail, extortion, and even spreading rumors to the community. Though compared to just how horrific and violent their methods would later become, some blackmail and rumor spreading is pretty quaint. While the Communist Party was a perfect training ground for refining their domestic espionage methods, the activities that would make COINTELPRO infamous were perpetrated in civil rights groups, starting in the late 50s and continuing to the 60s. Dr. T.R.N. Howard, a prominent black surgeon, entrepreneur, and civil rights leader, was critical of the FBI's inaction on a number of infamous hate crimes, including the murders of Emmett Till and George Washington Lincoln. This prompted Hoover to turn the dangerous attention of Sullivan and his FBI cronies to black civil rights groups, starting with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. On the grounds that they were supposedly hotbeds of subversive communist activity, the Southern Christian civil rights leaders in American history, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. It all gets a whole lot worse from here. In 1963, Dr. King gave his iconic I Have a Dream speech during the March on Washington, while generations of people across the world were touched and inspired by this incredible piece of history. The FBI was terrified. Dr. King was treated too big for their liking. They wanted to put him in his place. That place being 6 feet below the ground. Hoover ordered Sullivan to turn his attention to this kind of destroying King and the movement he helped represent. Sullivan subsequently released a horrifically racist statement in the light of King's powerful demagogic speech. We must mark it now, we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the Negro in national security. The espionage began. King's lonely hotel rooms were bugged, and his phones were tapped. The FBI was listening intently to his every word for blackmail material that they could use to silence him. You're probably asking to silence him, as if pressure him. Housing and police, to which he answered, no, they wanted Dr. King to kill himself. In 1964, after a year of collecting audio evidence of Dr. King's marital affairs, King was sent a suicide package 2 days before he was supposed to collect his Nobel Peace Prize. The package included copies of incriminating audio, as well as a truly horrifying letter. The letter, while anonymous, is believed to some to have been written by Sullivan himself. It's a verbally abusive speech that opens with King. If you prove your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, don't dignify your name with the unit, Mr. or Reverend or your doctor, and your last name calls to mind only the type of such as King Henry King and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. The letter almost reads like the cruelest internet comment you've ever seen, complete with a plethora of personal insults and spelling errors. And much like an internet troll with a serious industry, the letter ends by attempting to pressure Dr. King into suicide. It reads, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason, and it has a definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before you know the abnormal fraudulent self is bare to the nation. While for legal reasons they stop just short of saying straight up, kill yourself or we'll humiliate you, the implications are crystal clear. When you so what? Hardly a look to the FBI assistant director at the time began to sounded imaginable. They were ruthless in their willingness to destroy reputations and lives to achieve their goals. But things were going to get a whole lot worse. While they were trying to manipulate Dr. King into taking his own life, the FBI were stoking the fires of tension among the nation against law. The organization of Afro-American Union, both known for their association with civil rights leader Hajj Obikel Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X. Through COINTELPRO, the FBI widened the rift between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad from the European. After a sustained harassment campaign involving infiltration, rumor mongering, and the artificial elevation of conflict, the disagreements of Malcolm X and Muhammad turned deadly. Malcolm X was assassinated by some Nation of Islam gunmen. While the FBI denied direct involvement in the assassination, there's extremely credible evidence that their involvement in exacerbating the conflict led to the murder. As the 1960s grew on, the FBI intensified its COINTELPRO operations against prominent civil rights groups. Dr. King and his associates in particular. This project was known as COINTELPRO Blackgate. According to a 1968 FBI memo, they feared that Martin Luther King Jr. was becoming a kind of messiah figure and would unite the various disparate civil rights groups into a force that could truly be reckoned with. If Dr. King ever decided to reject nonviolence and lead to armed revolt, they would be in serious trouble. King was up enemy number one, but prominent members of groups like the Black Panthers weren't far behind. All of them had to go. The FBI concluded with numerous police departments in cities with considerable Black Panther presences, including San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Philadelphia, and Chicago. They would coordinate raids into the homes of Black Panther members without warrants, during which many of said members were shot dead by police. One particularly infamous example is the assassination of Chicago Black Panther Party Chairman Fred Hampton on December 4th, 1969. Hampton was drugged and incapacitated by undercover FBI infiltrator William O'Neill. A Chicago Beat tactical unit his home at the FBI's behest and murdered Hampton in his bed
falsified witnesses. Reality was twisted to serve whatever purpose the FBI wanted it to. Pratt spent 27 years in jail for a relations murder charge because he was a member of the band. Members of the KKK, like Gary Thomas Rowe, were kept on the FBI's payroll as informants while still committing atrocities like the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Under COINTELPRO, it was clear that the FBI preferred hardline white supremacy groups to black liberation. They funded and supported former members of the 1960s far-right group of Minutemen. Their goal to create this secret army organization, essentially a militant terrorist cell that fought against civil rights groups with tactics of intimidation and outright violence. Hundreds, if not thousands, of potential enemies of the FBI were spied on with everything from wiretaps to direct stalking techniques. They dealt with the CIA in 1967 as part of their own domestic spying project, Operation Chaos. The COINTELPRO Reagan terror units, the whole decade, a decade mostly known for flower power, free love, and imported British rock. The whole program was so strong that even figures like James Baldwin, Ernest Hemingway, and Muhammad Ali were on their list of enemies. Incidentally, Muhammad Ali ended up being the major force at the end of the COINTELPRO operations. This 1971 left him to embrace acted as a form of cover while activist groups did the FBI broke into an FBI field office in Pennsylvania. The group stole critical files on the COINTELPRO operations. A big unlawfully sorted affair. Considerable scandals and shame for the FBI and the public eye. Within a year, GMT announced that centralized COINTELPRO operations were officially over. While the FBI has hardly been squeaky clean since, the dissolution of the centralized COINTELPRO operation was an undeniable win for anyone who likes the idea of living in a truly free country. Of course, only a fraction of the files were stolen, and many files subsequently released by the FBI have been heavily altered and redacted. The fact is, we'll never know the full extent of the FBI's sinister activity in 1971. But what we do know is that the FBI activities under the COINTELPRO umbrella were some of the most terrifying and illegal in American history. Groups who simply exercised their quintessential American First Amendment rights were attacked, detained, arrested, and dissolved. And the people who formed these groups were at best frightened and manipulated, and at worst murdered and pressured towards suicide. We wish people a more comforting ending, but instead, we'll leave you with two questions. What are the chances that COINTELPRO was an isolated incident? What else has the FBI done that we don't even know about? Check out FBI's most violent, most wanted of all time, and FBI versus CIA. How do they compare? For more fascinating FBI facts.
Okay, that's it for today, and see you next week.